අපගේ අනුප්‍රාණී ඔබ අප ජීවන වේ අප මුක්තිය ඔබගේ නව ජීවන ගෙමිනේ විදින අප පුබුදු කරන් මාතා ඥාන වීද වඩවමින රැගෙන යනු මැන ජය භූමි කරා චිත මවකගේ දරු කැළබැලිනා යමු යමු වී නොපමා ප්‍රේම වඩා සමවේද දුරනදා නමෝ නමෝ මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 මාතා
We would like to warmly welcome each and every one of you who are physically present here and also those who are joining online. This is our meeting of the ministers program. Part of that, we have organized a meeting with the leader of the opposition, and it is going to take the form of a discussion forum. So please feel free to ask your questions and be interactive, be engaged throughout the session. And I'm sure he'll be able to engage with you and provide you all the insights on questions that you may require clarifications on. So without much to do, may I please open the floor directly for the discussion.
No quick questions came. I thought of asking a question. Now, we have seen over the last many years, maybe over the 20 years, that the deterioration of our foreign reserves and that aspect has been deteriorating steadily, and it has been deteriorated faster and faster. And today it's coming to a situation that when I talk to people and my friends, they say there is no hope, the country is finished. That means what I gather is there is no recovery from this situation. They said whoever comes to power, there is no solution. It's going to, we are finished. What do you think on this issue, Honorable Mr. Prime Minister? What is the hope? Is there a possibility of recovery?
First and foremost, good evening to you all. Honorable Iran Vikramratne and distinguished members of the association, friends. Right at the outset, I requested your chairman to move away from tradition. That is, initially I think you have the respective politicians giving a sermon, and whether you like it or not, you have to listen to it. But I wanted to turn the tables around and give you all the opportunity of questioning, interrogating, and also examining our qualifications to be the alternate government. I think what the gentleman stated was the fact that foreign reserve deterioration has been taking place throughout the past few years, and now all of the people, what they see is darkness. Apparently there don't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel. I would like to say that I beg to differ. Of course, I do agree, if the state of affairs persists in this present manner, whereby we have governmental decision making which are based on knee-jerk reactions, ad hoc decisions, a small coterie of like-minded so-called experts, because if one examines the expertise of the recently appointed National Economic Council, yes, certainly you have a doomsday scenario. If you have the Johnston Fernando's advising on the future of Sri Lanka's economy, yes, there is a problem. So if things persist as it is, if it is status quo ante, yes, I think then we are in a lot of trouble. But I think if we make certain transformational changes in the way we govern, the governance process, how we arrive at decisions, how the decisions that are formulated have to be implemented in a time-targeted manner. If we use certain out-of-the-box solutions to the major problems, I think you mentioned about the foreign reserve issue. If I may remind you, that's not the sole problem. I think all these problems are interrelated. So the whole macroeconomic picture paints a very sorry state of affairs. We are suffering from triple deficits, the budget, trade, balance of payments. We have rising unemployment, rising inflation, retardation of economic growth, and in fact the economic growth that we do achieve is imbalanced, and it is unfairly redistributed among the population. So there are major issues. One thing I have to say with regard to the foreign exchange issue, or at least the effort to improve the foreign reserves, I think first and foremost the way economic policy is decided has to change. We need to have groups of experts, for example, take the Council of Economic Advisors that serves the US President. I believe in the Thatcher years, in UK, in the British system of government, people who are in the corporate sector, people who are familiar with economic theory. Now, if you go and ask Messrs., if I may quote their names, Johnston Fernando, about Keynesianism, monetarism, the command control economy, the free economic system or the mixed economic system, I doubt he would have the requisite wherewithal to comprehend the particulars. Why I say that is very important, because the theoretical economic grounding provides you with the opportunity of grasping in an intellectual manner economic theory. And that basic understanding is very important for governance. The head of state, the council of cabinet, members of the cabinet, at least those who are important members in terms of the main power centers within the economic system, those who are in charge of it, they should act in a synchronized manner. So first and foremost, I don't think the government knows where they're heading. There is no underpinning principles, basic precepts that are guiding them. They're just taking things very, very easy, assuming that tourism will save the day for them in terms of the accumulation of reserves. They have absolutely no idea of the difference between the floating system and the fixed exchange rate system. I remember quite well when the European community came into being. They also had a floating system, but they had a banded system where you had a upper limit and a lower limit. So the buying and selling of the euro currency took place to maintain the euro in a particular band, right? So that is called, it's what you call a controlled float. I don't think the government has any idea about controlled floats, or, you know, they've just, I think they have let it on for a free float right now, straight from a fixed exchange rate system. And these changes, at least a managed float, should have commenced several years ago. I think if you had read Mr. Vijayawardhana's article, which was written about a few days ago, I think, he says that these reforms, at least the way and the manner in which you control the exchange rate, you know, at least a managed float, or whatever the float is, it should have taken place some years ago. So we are now suffering the perils and consequences of foolish decisions. I just don't know what they base it on. Maybe Honorable Iran Vikramaratne may be able to better explain the motivations, because he and the economic troika of the SJB had the opportunity of visiting the governor of the central bank, so maybe he is better equipped to read his mind. But even if he is able to read Niwad Kabra's mind, there is no cohesiveness in the government. I think the finance minister is heading one way, the governor is heading one way, there is internecine conflict. You know, the whole issue of family bandism has creeped into governmental decision making. So I think there is what you may call a big policy gap. There's a policy gap. The government is stuck for policy. The government doesn't know what they're doing. So first and foremost, we have to change that. We have to have the experts providing the necessary inputs to formulate policy. Second is, we have to arrive at correct policy. So what is going to correct the present situation? I think that's what you're most interested in. But maybe the policy procedure is a bit boring for you all to hear. It is only when you have the correct procedure for policy making will you have the necessary policy resultants. If you have a messed up procedure, you will have messed up policy outputs. Right. So from our standpoint, I think we have to have a multifaceted approach. And that multifaceted approach will have short, medium, and long-term goals and objectives. in the short term, I think we have to go to the international financial institutions on our own agenda. So there is a general apprehension in terms of approaching the International Monetary Fund, purely because there has been occasions in history whereby the conditionality imposed by the IMF has been harsh and interpreted as being too strict. So that has desisted most from taking the IMF option. But I think that kind of a outlook on the IMF today is very much outdated. For one to come to such a conclusion, it's very important if we observe the lessons to be learnt, say from the debt struggle that Uruguay went through, Ukraine went through, Jamaica, all those countries went to the IMF. They had bad international ratings, very poor situations as far as foreign reserves are concerned. But in time, within a particular period, it all picked up. Their ratings went up, their foreign reserves came up to a satisfactory level. Basically, you have to at least maintain a reserve level which could service 6 to 8 months of your imports. That's the basic international formula that countries follow. I would say even higher the better, because you leave a lesser risk if you have higher, you call it monthly import coverage. So if you have a coverage for 10-12 months, that's excellent. You're in a very healthy position as far as the economy is concerned, as far as the foreign reserve position is concerned. So the experience of the IMF intervening in Uruguay, Ukraine, Jamaica, and there are several other case studies which I have studied already. That has shown me a different perspective where on certain occasions the IMF have not been so stringent in terms of conditionalities. The strictness that they have adopted had lessened to some extent. And also I think it's important when you say conditionality, kondesi, it's interpreted in a manner. Lanka has become dependent on an international financial institution, in a kind of a neo-colonial interpretation that is given in the political arena. I must say, when one considers some of the recommendations of IMF, what are they talking about? They're talking about ensuring that loss-making state-owned enterprises be made profitable. So I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a part of your economic restructuring process which you have to adopt. Otherwise, you as taxpayers have to keep on pumping billions and billions of rupees to loss-making state-owned enterprises. So I just brought up that particular example as one of the ways which IMF conditionality could be considered as something positive. So all in all, having studied these case studies of these particular countries, at least I have come to a conclusion, so has our team. We in the SJB, by the way, we have an economic troika consisting of Honorable Iran Vikramalaka, Honorable Harsha De Silva, and Honorable Kabir Rashid, who are bestowed with formulating our economic plan, economic policy program, and we are in the process of articulating and finalizing it. We're in the last stages. You also have to understand everything is in a state of flux. The environment that exists today is totally different to the environment that exists tomorrow. So things are in a state of flux. So our policy structure and policy body and also policy outputs must be and have to be dynamic. It can't be static. It has to be dynamic. It has to be able to address the day-to-day issues that are cropping up, arising. So I think approaching international financial institutions through a process whereby we initiate it, we try to champion our agenda rather than a group of international bureaucrats dictating what ought to constitute our agenda. That can certainly be done. That's primarily done through sound, intellectual, fact-based, studies-based, topic-based, subject-based argument. So if you have people with the requisite acumen in the economic arena, which we do have, we can certainly get a good deal. So we'll have to talk, we'll have to discuss, we'll have to negotiate. So negotiations are not a bad thing. If you're properly equipped with the necessary tools and capabilities, you can win the day. So I think approaching the international monetary institutions is one aspect. The other is we must commence negotiations so that we embark on a debt restructuring process. And this involves obtaining the help of experts who are already familiar with the job. There are international experts who have familiarity in doing the restructuring. I don't think the present government has approached any such experts, but I'm happy to say that we have. We have spoken to such experts, we have discussed, we have spoken, we have debated, and we have basically, since we are in opposition, we cannot enlist their help. That can only be done through the government. But certainly we are willing to facilitate the process as an accountable and responsible and proactive opposition to ensure that Sri Lanka extricates itself from this very, very dire situation. So approaching international monetary institutions, point one. Point two, a debt restructuring program. Point three, recruiting the specialists who have the requisite skills to embark on this process, because this is it's not a joke. There are so much of intricate details that are involved, and this we do know because we all have gone through. As I mentioned, I go back to the Ecuador. That's the other country that I forgot to mention. Ecuador case study, Uruguay case study, Ukraine, Jamaica, and these specialists and their interventions are very important, and they have turned it around. They have turned it around. I can give you so many examples where countries that have lagged in their ratings as far as Standard & Poor, Moody's, and Fitch are concerned, within a year and a half, they have recovered. But we have to be very disciplined. We have to ensure that we stick to our targets. There's no way that you can diverge from the program that you agree upon. A fourth dimension, if I may say so, is in addition to all of this. I don't think these steps alone would suffice. This is, of course, my personal view. We need to have a support program. A support program whereby immediate payments do not take place, but we get a kind of a decent interval to overcome the present problem. And I can tell you with responsibility that I have spoken with 3 nation states in the international community, and they are willing to give a 2-year respite in terms of them furnishing fuel supplies which our country needs, and payments can be delayed by 2 years. Okay, so that is a kind of a respite. But in addition to that, I would further argue that we have to somehow or other use our power to persuade to get a grant. I'm not talking of the financial support that one thinks of gaining from the IMF. This is from something totally different. So that, of course, will be dependent on the skills of the head of state. You have to be able to be a person, a likable person, who is able to go to the international community, talk to them, explain the situation, and try to obtain some grant assistance. It's not an easy thing, because already Sri Lanka has been classified as a middle income country. Of course, with COVID, now it is classified, I believe, as a low middle income country. So when you are called a middle income country, you do not qualify for grants. But yet, you do have to understand international relationships. History has taught lessons, can be based on personal friendships. I do remember a time when funding was sought for the Victoria Dam project. I believe there was a meeting, Commonwealth Heads of Government in Zimbabwe. I don't want to lie to you, either Zimbabwe or the Lusaka, which my father attended. I think it's in the book written by Mr. Bradman Virapur. So, you had my father writing a small note to the then Prime Minister Thatcher, and she wrote back saying, yes, we will try to help with the fund. So those kinds of personal interactions, that's what you call international politics, and the conduct of excellent external relations. So we have every confidence that we could talk with the international community, both on a bilateral basis and on a multilateral basis, both country-wise and institution-wise, and try to get a grant package. This, of course, is my sole idea, because I think that would provide some sort of an additional cushion, because you have to understand we are in a vicious cycle. Okay, this vicious cycle, if I may go through it, was generated by the 600 to 800 billion rupee tax cuts which this government implemented right at the inception of this administration, I believe within the first 2 months. So you had, roughly speaking, a substantial amount of state revenue lost, thereby indicating to the international financial rating institutions that prudent financial management was not taking place, so they downgraded our ratings, Fitch, Moody's and Standard & Poor. That prevented us from reaching out to the international capital markets to obtain dollar loans to repay our annual existing loan stock. Hence, we had to resort to using the reserves to pay off for the loans, thereby restricting the use of foreign exchange and dollars on essential imports such as medicine, food, and oil. When you don't have oil, you and our team possess the requisite skills to deal with this issue. They have the acumen, they have the knowledge, they have the experience, and more important, they are willing to make sacrifices. So the example will come from the top. So we will lead from the top, and everyone else will have to follow. If we are to, recover the situation and come out of this very, very difficult economic situation. So there are lots more that I can add, but to add a bit of flavor and color, I would also request my colleague, Honorable Iran Vikramratne, also to speak about other aspects that we have to go ahead with. One thing is for sure, there has to be a total change in macroeconomic management, both macro and micro. So, Iran, if you can add. Is it? Okay, all right. Did I answer your question, by the way? Are you satisfied? If you are not satisfied, you are allowed to ask me more. Yeah.
On what you mentioned, the sacrifices that leaders should do. First, I'm sorry that I didn't introduce myself. I am the brother of your late father's secretary, Mr. A.R. Karunaratne. So, now, if you can remember, during the time when President Jayawardena was heading the country, you could see him traveling in his maroon car. No security vehicles were there, and he was traveling without any security. And our members of the parliament, they were traveling even in, they had no security at all. But due to these LTT bombs in Colombo and so on in the country, they increased the security. That's fine. And president is supposed to be having 500 in president security, and when he travels about 25 vehicles with ambulances and all traveling, and the other ministers are also having so many vehicles following them and leading. Now the country has come back to normal. It's all right when the time of the, this terrorism and all that, having such security. But now the country has come back to normal. There are no bombs. But the security maintained at that time, they are continuing. And why don't the opposition now tell the leaders, you have to cut down this, because and that also contributes to our dollar situation, the country's economy, the amount of money spent for these securities is huge. So have you taken, or do you think that you should take this up and get them to reduce their such high expenses, extravagance?
So when you talk of sacrifices, are you okay? Okay. So when you talk of making sacrifices, so I'm talking of sacrifices whereby wasteful expenditure, unnecessary expenditure, expenditure on what I may call symbolic projects. So for example, I always believe that if we are to spend the taxpayers' funds, or even funds obtained through loans, you have to have a net return for the country. Net return that is quantifiable. If there's a positive return, you go ahead with the project. If there's a negative return, you don't go ahead with the project. So that's basic cost-benefit analysis to you. So when I'm talking of cutbacks and sacrifices, it's across the board. It looks at all the areas where wasteful activities take place. Now, coming to your point with regard to security, to be very honest, I also felt extremely secure in 2019. I didn't have much security coming with me. In fact, I never used an official vehicle as a minister. I didn't use the official fuel allowance, nor did I use the official bunk that you're given. Yet, what happened with the Easter attack? So that took place. So I must say, irrespective who the president or the prime minister is, I think the security of the head of state, the prime minister, and those who are in government, and those who are considered as targets, right? I think the basic security should and ought to be given. You can always argue about the numbers, and numbers and types of assistance you get should be based on very logical and careful analysis of threat assessments. I also thought that we had eradicated terrorism, and the Easter attack was a shock to me. I mean, that was terrorism, and still we are struggling to find the brains behind that attack, the so-called the brainchild, those who were the planners, the instigators, and so on and so forth. There's utter confusion with regard to that issue. So, yes, there are areas where the security detail can be cut back, but I think it should be based on proper threat assessments rather than just taking an ad hoc approach and saying, okay, there is too much of security people, you have to reduce. No, I think you should follow a different approach. But I do agree with you that there is scope for a lot of cutbacks. There are so many symbolic projects that do not accrue much to the country. It does not, there is no net value addition to the country. So those types of what you may call so-called white elephant projects, if it ever comes to the decision-making table, should be completely thrown out. So when I say making sacrifices, I think there is a perception that among the people that the governors and the rulers of the country that they have a disproportionate share of welfare or facilities when compared with the 22 odd million that live in our country. So that perception is it's a very bad thing. It's an insult to those politicians who make the sacrifices and work very hard, day in, day out, and to kind of paint all of these politicians with a broad brush, putting everyone into the same casket. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's prudent thinking. But certainly, there are lots and lots of places where you can make cutbacks. From my academic history, I do remember, in 1979, in UK, there was a situation called the Winter of Discontent. The Prime Minister at that time was the Labour Prime Minister Callaghan, Jim Callaghan. So you had Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, the lady with the iron fist, or the Iron Lady. She came into government. So Britain was known as the poor man of Europe, quote, right? So one of the novel ways that she used to cut back on waste is she established a special unit in the PM office that was well known as the Rayner Efficiency Unit, RAYNOR Efficiency Unit. And you know who Rayner was? Rayner was the head of Marks and Spencer's. So you had a corporate sector head who had achieved in making non-profitable institutions into profitable institutions through efficiency measures, coming into government and cutting costs and waste. So that may be an approach that we can adopt here in our country. And that's just one thing that we can learn from. By the way, now, if I may just go back to your initial question of foreign exchange earnings. We had a brilliant opportunity right at the inception of COVID, but we didn't grab that opportunity. When I mentioned that in Parliament, it was laughed at. And I think even on Facebook, some of the people in our country were mimicking it. Right at the inception of COVID, you had a sudden outflow of capital from China. A lot of corporate sector investments withdrew from China, especially American investments, Japanese investments, and South Korean investments. What did Prime Minister Modi do? Do you know what he did? He established a special unit at PMO, that is Prime Minister's office. He recruited the best and the brightest. I mean, he had a kind of a head-hunting session and got the corporate cream of society to come and temporarily work at PMO. And they were given a target. And that target was bring the investments leaving China, make the outflow from China into an inflow to India. Though not the same, countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, they used a variety of ways to encourage, induce, and attract foreign investments and thereby dollars. And that is why, even when this government persists in stating that, oh, the dollar crisis is due to COVID, you look at the facts and the figures. It is only in Sri Lanka that we have had this tremendous decline of dollars, whereas most of the other countries, be it India, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan, China, whatever, all those countries have had an increase in dollars, dollar reserves. So I mentioned that that particular incident. I mean, you have major proposals that are made in Parliament, and you're either mimicked or laughed at, ridiculed, maybe because you utter something intelligent. We also have that deficit in our society also. When you propose something novel and innovative, that is cast aside. I don't know why it's cast aside, because that particular policy brought great dividend to India in terms of attracting investors who are leaving. So there was capital outflow from China, and they transformed and translated into capital inflow into India. If ever you are dissatisfied with my answers, please interrogate me.
Good evening, sirs. It's indeed a pleasure to have you here. During recent times, we have seen that there was a lot of request to float the dollar. That was thought to be some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. Now, by the look of it, light at the end of the tunnel has become a train which had run over us. So, what is the immediate solution to this issue? Because there is definitely a dearth of dollars in the market. So, how to rather than looking at loans, what could be done in the short term, medium term, and in the long term to overcome this problem? Because we have a severe trade imbalance of say maybe $22 billion of imports and about $12 billion of exports. So that gap, that's a trade balance, but then there are certain positives which are coming with the foreign remittances and all that. But overall, when you look at the past, there had been a severe imbalance here. Then the other issue is the IMF. Now there's a lot of negative thoughts about IMF. Why not communicate to the people of Sri Lanka what are the positives of IMF? Where we have we have previously we have sought certain facilities from IMF, and how we have overcome certain issues in the past. Now I have seen in the newspapers that IMF had gone to Argentina, supported the issue, and the interest rate is supposed to be 42.5, but no one talks about the inflation rate of 51 there. So it's unfortunate that the media does not convey the right situation, which creates serious negative inference in the thoughts of the people. Thank you, sir.
So, I never mentioned Argentina because that's not a case study which shows success. You have to understand that just enlisting the support of the IMF alone would not suffice. The particular receiving country has to abide by the targets. From what I gather, the problem with Argentina was the fact that the governments were not disciplined enough to manage their finances. So, as I mentioned to you about Ecuador, I have the case studies right in front of me. It took approximately 6 months for Ecuador to come up in their ratings from roughly triple C to B minus, right? 6 months. But of course, Ecuador, if I'm interpreting these figures correct, they went for something called preemptive restructuring. That is, they saw the problem coming and they commenced early. Now, you just mentioned in your question that, okay, the fixed rate was benefiting Sri Lanka somehow, and the free float has created a very bitter situation for the people. That's why I qualified my statement by saying that the float should have happened sometime earlier, right? That is what even Deputy Governor Vijayawardena has mentioned. Do you know when the rate was fixed, how much of dollars that we lost? Primarily because of the various other nefarious schemes, such as, what is it, Undial, and there are certain acronyms that are used, right? How much was lost? I can show you the figures. On a monthly basis, remittances were declining by huge percentages. I'm not saying that this float is going to sort out everything. You see, it has to be a package. All these have to go together. Not you, if just because you come out of fixed to a float, just because you saw the IMF either tweeting or putting out a press release saying, do this, do that. That alone won't suffice. You have to have an integrated approach. That's why I said that, there are certain components, debt restructuring, getting IMF assistance, talking to the debt restructuring experts, and in addition to all of that, talk to countries. Why can't this government talk to OPEC and the major oil producers in the Middle East? Why can't they speak? I'm telling you, we can achieve a respite. I'm telling you with the fullest confidence. So why can't they talk to OPEC? What's the problem? The problem is during and before COVID, and while this government was in opposition, They used racism, xenophobia, discrimination, victimizing the very people that live in our country, and that has created a bad feeling with most in the international community, especially the Middle Eastern countries. That's a fact of life. You have to accept that. For no reason, based on fiction, based on mythical ideas, they prevented the burials taking place. When all over the world, you know, the WHO directives basically recommended that you can go ahead with burials. So, all I can tell you is SJB as a party, we have the necessary tools, the capabilities to communicate, to talk, to discuss, to negotiate, and add value to our country. Mark my word. And we have shown that while being in opposition. The example that I am trying to give you right now may sound small because of the figures involved. But do you know, for the very first time, the international community are working with the opposition and funding the opposition to do development work? Please tell me an example in the aftermath of our independence in our democratic history where governments have provided grants to the opposition to embark on development work. So why I'm giving you that example is we are not going to behave in a frog in the well type of policy as far as external affairs are concerned. We are not isolationists. We are internationalists. So we will talk to the international community, we will engage them, we will have a very positive discussion with them. And mark my word, at the end of the day, the skill of the head of state will determine whether those discussions end up in value addition to our country or value reduction. So we are equipped, but I'm not going to paint a rosy picture. I'm not going to say that we have the magic wand. As soon as we come into power, you wave the wand and everything is going to settle. Not so. You have to go through a process. The debt restructuring process in Ecuador have proved that. The debt restructuring process in Ukraine, if somebody challenges, I have the figures to show. The debt restructuring process in several other countries, even in Jamaica, have shown that if you take major steps, and major steps may not sound nice most of the time. We may have to go through certain hardships. We may have to take certain difficult decisions, right? But those difficult decisions will provide future dividends for the country. And I very honestly believe that we have the capability, the capacity to take those decisions and provide leadership to the country, rather than having this wishy-washy type of government. I mean, nobody knows where we are heading. Are you telling me the finance minister knows the major aspects of the macroeconomy in our country? Does he have any understanding about cost push inflation, demand pull inflation? But I'm sorry to say this, the vast majority, I hope you won't get annoyed, even the intelligentsia in the metropolis of Sri Lanka went with the wave. They went with the wave. I mean, I'll tell you where you may have gone wrong. You know, you had a situation where the candidate was choreographed in all his activities. You all were never given the chance to interrogate, question, so that you could gauge a person's capacity, the capability, right? Whether that person had the, at least the rudimentary knowledge, basic knowledge. I don't claim to be an expert. He's the expert. He's the economic expert. But when you're the leader, you must have some basic knowledge and idea of how to manage the economy. But I'm sorry to say, the so-called intelligentsia also gave him a blank check. You all gave a blank check. Lock, stock and barrel. So we are all suffering the consequences. Please don't get hurt by what I say, but because that's also a fact of life. At least now, please don't go with your emotions and all these useless rallers and waves. What rubbish. You think so-called waves can decide and define the destiny of our motherland? No, not at all. Now, my father was not Oxford, Harvard educated, but didn't he, with wars on two fronts, manage to bring Marks and Spencer's, all the big international businesses, in times of strife, in times of civil strife and conflict, in times of terrorism, the 200 garment factory program. So we are at least getting some life support from the garment sector right now, thanks to the 200 garment factory program. So it's a practicality that is involved. But you have to have basic knowledge. And going back to my father, he had knowledge that he accumulated not through academic qualifications, which I have. It was learning by doing. He went through the University of Life, and for the very first time during his administration, do you know that the World Bank gave subsidies for poverty alleviation for Janasavya? They gave grants. So can we get a grant now from the World Bank for Samurdhi? Where in certain occasions, you see certain well-off people also being Samurdhi recipients. So the cash grant, so the subsidies are not properly targeted. That's also something that we have to talk about and implement. Support has to be targeted, because providing subsidies and support is a means to an end. It's a means to the end of alleviating poverty. But here, with the well-off people also getting Samurdhi, you are just perpetuating a system that is misallocation of resources, inefficiency, and a wastage of taxpayers' funds. Excuse me? You're talking about executive presidency. Right, okay, let me tell you my outlook, right? So when you look back in history, so many presidential candidates have gone even in front of Dalada Maligawa and promised that they will abolish the presidency, and they have not done so. So having recalled that history, I have a different view on the system of government, which may be unique. You mentioned a word, omnipotent. That is a presidency with supreme powers. What I believe is having an executive, a judiciary, and a legislature that checks itself. So, in past history, most politicians who perceived in themselves as being successful presidential candidates They always said we should protect the executive presidency. Those candidates who could not win presidential elections but could somehow or other conjure up a majority in parliament, they supported the so-called executive prime minister system. I would say you should have something in between. You must not strive to make either the president or the prime minister a scarecrow, in the middle of a paddy field. That should not be the case. Have a system of checks and balances where you check oneself, where in the tripartite democratic system of executive, legislature, and judiciary, have a system of checks and balances. We will bring back the 19th. We will not only bring back the 19th, we will make it 19 plus. Now, 19 plus means you're making sure that the checks and balances are much, much more strong. So that, say, for argument's sake, if I am the executive president, I cannot act according to my own whims and fancies. I have to ensure that my actions are controlled. Consultation has to take place. Discussion has to take place. You can be strong-minded in your thinking. No problem with that. And if you're clear-cut, and if you're righteous, you'll be able to win over others, even though they may be your political detractors. So you have to have I believe in a system of checks and balances. I don't believe in making the prime minister the scarecrow, nor the president the scarecrow. So here you had the situation with the 20th Amendment. The younger brother, the president, made the older brother, the prime minister, a scarecrow. I said that in parliament, out in the open. I said, don't do it. If you are changing something, make sure that both are checked and balanced. But they said no, they needed the 20th Amendment to embark on a journey of high technology, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, coding, robotics, and Oracle, and so on and so forth. So that's my view on the executive presidency. Of course, abolishing 20th, and you're not just going back to 19th. We are taking, because actually, to be very honest, 19th was a very laudable step, but it had its weaknesses. For example, there were funding issues. There were issues with regard to providing the necessary workforce, the officials, for those institutions to function. But as a policy, it was a good thing, because you brought in good governance. You brought in consultation. Either an individual nor a group of people could not behave in a manner that was against the country's interest.
Sir, that is the case, sir. To my understanding, financial or monetary powers are vested in the parliament. So what is the role of opposition in that context? And what will happen if a government like this will continue with their powers maybe for the next 3 years, and if we are in a bankrupt state in the next 3 years or likewise, so whether any government could be in power, but will there be any fruitful outcome?
Yeah, so constitutionally, the power of the purse is in the legislature. However, because of people's preferences, you have extreme majoritarianism within the legislature. You understand? So irrespective of the broad principle, broad statement, Parliament has the power of the purse, and Parliament has the power of finances, people in our country, when they voted voted for the president, 6.9 million, they made sure 6.8 million was allocated in the parliamentary elections. Okay, so a huge majority. And once they came into power and once we went into parliament, there was coaching of several members who contested under our ticket in order to establish the 2/3 so that they could bulldoze their way through with the 20th. So you have majoritarianism, even though parliament has the power of the purse. That's why I say with 19 plus, we have to make sure that we have the necessary checks and balances enhanced to make sure that extreme majoritarianism does not give the power to an individual government to work according to their own whims and fancies. It's called governing with impunity. You can't allow governance with impunity. And that's what you have happening today. And okay, you say accountability to parliament as far as financial matters are concerned. Now, have you heard the finance minister coming to parliament and giving a kind of a feedback or a report or at least a presentation on the state of the economy? He's avoiding parliament. I just heard Honorable Kiriel mentioning the fact that he had not attended parliament or nor spoken for X number of weeks. I can't remember the number. Yeah, whatever. So, you have majoritarianism right now. Even though the parliament has the power of the purse, they are bulldozing and stamping their authority and they are trying to have their own way.
I might, at the risk of repeating some of the things, answering some of these questions. The question on what needs to be done immediately, and we conveyed this to the governor of the central bank when we went there a couple of days ago, that basically the debt needs to be restructured. There's no getting away from that. Because our reserves, foreign currency reserves, in 2019, when we handed office, was $7.6 billion. And in 2 years, it was down to $1 billion. And if you ask me what it is today, I don't have official numbers, but I would estimate that it's between $400 to $500 million. That would be my estimate. Serious issue. 80% down in 2 years. Asia's 3 biggest countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Asia's 3 small countries, South Asia's, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives. All these countries, in the 2-year period, the reserves increased by 25 to 35%, it just went up. Ours went down by 80%. So this hiding behind COVID is not really an answer. COVID affected a lot of countries, including ours. Example, tourism. I don't need to say more to business people. You know how it's picked up in some of the neighborhood countries, while ours is still, down there. So the immediate question is, you have to go. I don't know why the delay is. As you know, we get the debtors around the table, we'll discuss it. The Paris Club meets. It's not that we want the IMF, because if you run this country properly, right, nobody needs to dictate to you. It's because you mismanage, then people basically begin to dictate to you. In a negotiation, your position is weaker. So for the debtors to agree on the restructuring program, obviously they will need the International Monetary Fund to sit at the table. There's no question about it. As the leader of the opposition said, in financial markets, and all of you know this, it's confidence. It's built on confidence, not just on policy. So the confidence in whom you are dealing with. And that's a very, very, very critical point. I have a first-hand experience here immediately after the Easter bombing. The tourist industry was badly hit. Mangala Samaravira, finance minister, was out of the country a little later, and I was acting minister of finance. And the tourist industry came to me and said they just can't meet their loan obligations to the financial institutions and banks. I thought about it hard, and I took a unilateral decision. And the unilateral decision was, I said, we have to give a moratorium. So I went to the Prime Minister, I explained it to him. He told me, present it to the cabinet. I went the next day and I presented it to the cabinet. I came out of the room, cabinet room, I called the media and announced it. And within hours, the International Monetary Fund was on the phone with me because we had a program and they wanted to know why this was done without consultation. What I did tell them was that this is an emergency and it needs an emergency response. Tell me one country in the world that has actually faced an exogenous emergency like this. You know, financial markets work on confidence and who is behind it and whether you know what you are doing. And I think that we have a crisis here. And our conversation with the governor of the central bank was, please change the policy stance. It's not going to get the country out of where it is. It's actually sliding. And that's where we went. The economy is all tied up. As you know, exchange rates on one hand. And the theory there which we will follow is if the government is ready to sell exchange at a rate, they need to also buy at that rate. You can't create parallel markets and a black market in the long run. That will be disastrous for the country. But that alone is not enough because inflation will rise now. It was rising anyway, and therefore the interest rate will have to be used as well. So there will be winners and losers in this. Today, somebody called me and said, Iran, do you know of any garment factories that is willing to sell? Because I want to buy another garment factory because my network, the orders are so big that we can't meet them. If there's anybody here, please tell me and I will certainly convey it to the other party. So there are winners and losers, obviously. Whether on the export side or the import side, there will be winners and losers. But as the leader of the opposition said, one thing needs to be clear, that the poor have to be safeguarded. 23% of families are getting samurdhi, but we can't do that. We have to target, we have to absolutely target the poor among them, and the pittance we are giving them won't see them through. But once it's targeted, we can triple it, once it's targeted. So on one hand, you have to cushion people who are going to suffer during the adjustment so that there's social stability while we are going through the changes. So reforms will be needed, no question about it. And state-owned enterprises was mentioned by the leader of the opposition. I used to be minister in charge of Sri Lankan Airlines. I said it 3 years ago. If anybody wants it, it's available for $1. I said it in Parliament. Everybody was shocked that a minister in charge will say a thing like that because people don't want to hear the truth. And I said, for $1, if anybody was taking it at that time, we'll certainly, make the airline available. But it's far more than that. State-owned enterprises have to be reformed. There is no going away. 2 years of an adjustment period. I don't think, you will understand that, but lots of people outside this room won't understand it. There will be a 2-year adjustment period while we go through the reforms. One of the questions that was asked was the remittances, the $67 billion, and this was asked on the social media. Will it go back? I'm confident that it will go back because if you move to a market exchange rate, people will remit and they will remit through the proper channels. Why are we finding fault with our sister who is working in the Middle East, sending $100 every month to take care of her parents? Why should she get only 20,000 rupees through an official channel when she can get 27,000 rupees through the unofficial channel? So you are creating two systems. If you just stay with the proper system, she'll remit her money because she has to look after her parents. So Undial, Hawala, all that is there, and we are not finding fault with any of them. But I'm finding fight with the government for not having a proper policy. So I believe that the remittances will, come back with time. Another question that was asked is, today the NMRA increased the prices of medicines. As a reflection, these are imported items, largely imported items, and basically it's to do with the dollar. And also another question was that the increase in fuel prices and the transport costs and the impact it will have, say, on commodity prices and so forth. So you will have inflation. On the medicinal issues, I would say this, that it's going to go up where the imports are concerned, right? But the government needs to look at cushioning that. And I will say some ways that how the SJB looks at it, right? On the transport costs, yes, transport costs will go. When some years ago, Mangala Samaravira and I came out and said that fuel is imported, we are not producing it in this country, it should reflect international prices, and we came with a fuel price formula. You remember the criticism, and everybody made a joke of it and laughed at it and tried to do it. But I'm glad to say that even 4 years later, people in this government have got up in parliament and said that was a mistake. Actually, it should have been implemented. Because when the international price goes up, our price goes up. When the international price comes down, our price comes down. Then the consumer makes the decision whether they're having the extra trip, whether they're going on holiday or not. The consumer decides that. Essential things they will do anyway. So it has to reflect because it's an international commodity. And I think that we are going to be back to that. I would like to say this as a SJB policy. When you look at expenditure, right, mainly government expenditure is salaries, and that it is retirement benefits and interest cost. And there is very little, virtually nothing else. And therefore, whatever else you do, you borrow to do it. You see, that's the critical analysis of the economy. We can't go on like this. We can't go on like this. We have to change this. You see, it's like you get a salary and all you do from the salary is you're paying the bank your interest, right? And, basically feeding the children and keeping some clothes on them. Then you don't have money to spend on education or on a house or on a vehicle or anything like that. So we have a policy, broad policy decision is that over the next 10 years on expenditure or investment, rather than on hard infrastructure, we'll put it on soft infrastructure. I.e., we will give priority not to carpeting the road and putting concrete on the road and building the highway. Our priority is going to be on soft infrastructure, on human resources. That's where the focus is going to be. So it's going to be on education, it's going to be on a population that is aging fast, it's going to be on protecting the poor, right? It's going to be on really upskilling the labor force. This country is a small country. It has two very big advantages. One is its locational advantage, right? A huge locational advantage. Ports, airports, our entry point into South Asia, the markets, the east-west shipping routes. So we have a huge location advantage. The other huge advantage that we need to have is on our human resources. So we must upskill them. We can't be sending mothers and sisters to work in the Middle East for $200-300. We want to send nurses for $2,000-3,000 a month. We have to upskill it. There's no question. We are beyond free education. We are in the concept of an education for all, beyond free education. Education for all. That might be university, it might be professional, it might be technical, it might be mechanical, because every human being is unique. One is not superior to the other. Every human being is unique. Some are better at their work with their mind, some are better with their work with their hands. Everybody has dignity, but everybody must be skilled and given the opportunity. And we will not restrict it. Some political parties got on the streets 40 years ago when J.R. Jayawardena, the president, tried to move in that direction. Closed universities. And more recently in the last parliament, when Neville Fernando, the former MP for Panadura, came up with the Neville Fernando Hospital and also a medical school. I'm so thankful for that hospital that lots of corona patients were able to benefit from that new hospital, but closed it down. What happened? We missed the education opportunity. Where are our children going? They're going to Belarus, they're going to the West Indies, they're going to Bangladesh, and places like that for an education. And others are going to Malaysia and Australia. We could have been that educational center. We were just caught up in ideological nonsense. And the SJB, we want to make sure that every child has an opportunity, and even others in the region could come here. So the shift is going to be from hard infrastructure to a focus on soft infrastructure in expenditure.
Honorable Vikram, I have one question. Sir, you mentioned about this infrastructure development. In that context, now India also has a monetization policy. We also now announced a monetization policy. Under the Indian monetization policy, the proceeds are given back to the country to develop infrastructure. But under our monetization policy, the proceeds are used to settle the loans. What is the stand SJB take on this matter?
I would say, no, that's okay. I would say that, almost all of these developments we are doing, particularly on the hard infrastructure, are very long-term returns, And then we are doing it all on borrowed funding, 100%. Hardly anything is being put in terms of capital, basically from the budget, right? And that is not sustainable at all, right? So if we can get investment, if we can get partnership, right, then that's a different question. But if we are using borrowed funding, then we need to use it for a quicker returns. And education at some level, the skill level, will be much faster. We've seen the examples in Malaysia, we've seen Australia, where there's so much emphasis with the tapes and so forth, right? That's what we should be doing. So that's why I said the policies are very broad. I'm not committing on specifics. Very broadly, we have decided where the shifts should come, and we are not going to be bent on ideological biases. You see, let's face it, the government has been unable to provide the education for all, right? 300,000 A-level, the last results that came, 160,000 qualified to go to a university. This year, we will only take 34,000 into the Sri Lankan university system. I had a minister saying, we'll try to increase it to 40,000, right? So you can see where the problem is. Why did we restrict the suppliers? There is a little social media piece going on at the moment, and you may have seen it, right? The finance minister of Tamil Nadu speaking, and you may have seen it over the last few days. And what did he say? He said when he was in university in 1983, there were only something like 3,800 or something, engineers coming. And he said today, it's more than 250,000 engineers. 80 times increase. Why? India took a different route and we took a different route. Not just on language, right? Language was also a part of that, right? But also in terms of how you actually supply. Universities created basically affiliated lots of private colleges, right? So these concepts are world tried and tested. They are not experiments anymore. So that is why I said at least we have identified where the shifts should be, and we will go for it. But hard infrastructure, the returns are fast, that's a different issue. But we won't be going and doing, these very long-term things with uncertain returns. We have to get away from this idea when a president is elected, he's a president of the whole country. He's not the president of his region. We have seen that happen now more than once. And certainly with the SJB president, Sajith Premadasa, that won't be the case.
Thank you, sir, for coming here. And my question is, now the country is running without the provincial council for like so many years. And personally, I think the number of politicians engaged in various levels, including the parliament, is too unbearable to a country in our scale. And what is your position on the provincial councils and the current number of politicians, those who are in the country? And apart from one next to you, there are only very few people truly contributing to the benefit. I mean, their skills to benefit the country, while the others are like just sucking the blood from the economy and like they are dependent on their political agendas.
May I also add to that the evolution appears to be a virtual horizon. That is again, how do you propose to handle it in a government without jeopardizing the national security? And if you don't agree with the concept of revolution, how do you propose to handle the volcanic situation of the skin between the minority and the majority? Thank you.
I am a great believer in the democratic system, participatory democracy. The three-tier system that we have in our country, I believe if it is implemented in an efficient manner, it will reap dividends. So when I talk about the three systems, it's you have the local government system, you have the provincial system, and then you have the central government. You mentioned the fact that, the sucking blood scenario. You see, we have to make sure that these systems function in an efficient manner. Right? Take the provincial councils. Does the central government give adequate resources so that the provincial councils can carry out their duties? They don't. True. On the other hand, some of the steps taken by the provincial councils leaves a lot to be desired. There you have the issue of duplication, wastage of money, so on and so forth. So there are streamlining that has to take place, but I am a firm believer in the provincial council system. Right? Just because the system fails, you have to do a thorough analysis as to why it fails. What are the problems? In fact, because of the lack of resources that are being apportioned to the provincial councils, you have automatically created a social divide. There's an educational divide. Approximately 10,100 schools in totality, right? You have what you call central government schools, numbering 400, 500 or thereabouts. There are some boards that have come up in this present administration. So the board has changed, calling the schools national schools, but none of the resources nor the necessary human resources, nor the physical structures have been provided. But roughly speaking, 400 to 500 central government schools. Everything else is in the provincial level. If you ask a parent, given the choice of sending your child to a school, which school would you choose? I would bet my bottom rupee that you will have a vast majority of parents approving the schools that are under the central government. Similar with the health sector. You have the major hospitals, the national and general hospitals that come under the central system, and everything else comes under the provincial. But when you look at the allocation of resources, I'm not happy with the way the provincial councils have been funded. So you don't fund the provincial councils. You call them white elephants. You say, oh, they don't deliver. Of course they won't deliver if you don't give them adequate funds. Similarly, if you don't provide funds to the national schools, they will also deteriorate. So I think we have to make the provincial system work. I personally believe in that because that creates the structures that are necessary to ensure that we have greater empowerment of the people. I don't consider provincial councils as a mere device to sort out the various issues that you may have within different ethnic groups and religious groups. Not so. Now, you spoke of a kind of a time bomb situation as far as the various communities are concerned. Why? That's because of the racist policies of this government. This government promotes polarization. This government promotes discrimination. This is a racist government. That's a fact. So they call themselves patriots. Look at the situation that they have created. Now, is this patriotism? Inflation flying high. You have the queues for petrol, diesel, and so on and so forth. Scarcity of food. Scarcity of milk powder. Tremendous increases which are unbearable to the lower rungs in society, the self-employed, the daily waged, the urban and rural poor, farmers who were, quite well empowered through their agricultural activities. Of course, I believe the agricultural sector personally needs a great deal of reform in terms of getting more bang per buck. The yield has to be increased. We have to use modern technology. Be that as it may, they created a situation, this huge fertilizer crisis, and they have disempowered the farmer. So the toxicity of this government is a toxic government. It gathers momentum and power through division, through emotions that are based on certain phenomena that is not suited to a civilized country. We are a civilized nation. Take Rwanda. What's happening in Rwanda? What are they calling Rwanda now? The Singapore of Africa. Hutus, Tutsis, conflict, 800,000 murdered, no more. They've all combined to make Rwanda a Singapore. So if Rwanda can do it, why can't we? We still keep on going on and on and on about patriotism without properly defining patriotism. What you have today is what I would call pseudo-patriotism. Patriotism based on flimsy stuff. This is not being patriotic. Being patriotic is having positive growth. Being patriotic is having adequate income redistribution among all sectors of the society based on justice and fairness. Patriotism is having an education system whereby you equip the 4.3 million student population with the ability to compete in the international labor market. So a few months ago, I think there was a laudable attempt to try and bring in English-based education into some of the schools. What did you have the former education minister coming up and saying? I'm totally against this. That was his proclamation. But if you do inquire into those who are connected to his family, the kids, the children, where do they obtain their education? How did they do it? If those kids have access to modern technology, modern tools of education, why should the children of the common man and woman be disempowered, be secluded from that society? So I don't think the systems that you have in representative democracy as the basic issue. I think we have to strengthen the provincial councils in terms of providing the necessary finances, providing the necessary human resources. Of course, we have to ensure that systems are put in so that wastage doesn't take place, because I have also observed situations where the decentralized budgets of the provincial councillors are used for unnecessary distributions. So I agree, those have to be curtailed. Those have to be reformed, no doubt.
But the country is running without provincial council this period, so there's no sort of a visible sort of a
No, it is running with provincial councils. The provincial councils are running, all right. They are being run by provincial council bureaucrats. You don't have the representation. System is running. So the system is running according to the whims and fancies of the central government. You know, make no mistake, they are giving the orders through the governors to give the necessary finances to the potential provincial council candidates to go ahead and work in those areas. That's happening. It's a bit like Undial and Havala. The Undial and Havala of politics. So they are controlling the system through other means. So I think, of course, there are areas where we have to reform, even in the local government system. Nothing is perfect, right? So in some cases, the situation in some local authorities in the post-election scenario has been highly confusing, right? So even there have been issues where, as in a cricket match or in any other sport, you put the toss. So the toss decides the mayor. So those are weaknesses that we have to eradicate from the system. But the present system has empowered at least 25% permanent representation of women in local authority governance, which is a very sound thing. That's a sign of a maturing society. That's a sign of a maturing democracy. So as far as enmity, suspicion, and mistrust and distrust between people of various ethnic and religious groups, That's all generated by the leaders to make sure that those divisions become a catalyst in their own electoral victories. And the creation of such division, that particular racism, that particular discrimination, that has shut the doors for this administration to go to the oil-rich countries in the Middle East to ask for relief. I'm being very open with you. They are willing to support the SJB government, but not this racist administration. That's not my problem. These problems were created by themselves. So, their majoritarianism has impacted even their own government at times of crises. You know, the government must not think that everything is going to be hunky-dory 24/7, 365. When you're in government, you have to prepare yourself for crisis management. You have to be ready. First thing you do in government, from what I understand of governance, from what I have learned, from what I have read, is scenario planning. You have to plan for scenarios in all of the sectors. Economy, education, health, environment, weather patterns, various other environmental changes that may take place. Because we have to be ready. Now we went through a huge tsunami. What was it, 2004? And we lost large numbers of lives. I believe over 30,000, I can't remember the exact figure. Homes lost, lives lost, properties destroyed, so on and so forth. Do we still have an adequate weather radar system that provides accurate weather for our country? Do we have that? We still don't have. So a catastrophe like the tsunami has not motivated our rulers and governors to prepare ourselves for the worst. The governors are living, the rulers are living a cushy life. They don't want to expect the unexpected, which governments should do. You always have to expect the unexpected. That's called strategic planning. That's called strategic scenario mapping. So when the government decided to give 600 to 800 billion rupee tax cuts, they should have done an analysis. Never in any sane economic management program do you give so much of tax cuts straight away. They could have gone on a step-by-step approach. You give a tax cut. So what happens with the tax cut? Supposedly your disposable income increases, correct? So once you ascertain the disposable income, you have to look at how that disposable income will be spent by the individual or the household. So you look at marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to invest, marginal propensity to save. You all are familiar with the aggregate demand management theory of John Maynard Keynes. C plus G plus I plus X minus M. X means exports minus imports. So when you are giving a tax cut, you get additional disposable income. Then you have to look at where that money is going to be spent. Is it to invest? Is it to save? Is it to consume? If it is consumption, is it import oriented? So you basically do a study and you look at the impact of that tax cut. What is the net benefit? Is there a net value addition? There's a net growth for the country. Then you can move on to the next set of tax cuts. So what this government did was, without any consideration for a step-by-step approach, they decided on giving vast-scale tax cuts, which I must say was very well received. It was very well received. Now most of the people who received it well are now, crying about it. But it's better that when steps are taken, to think several times about the long-term impact, rather than, becoming satisfied with, steps that may fulfill your short-term appetites. You have to look at the medium and long term. So, to put it in a succinct manner, we have to have scientific government, we have to have professional government. And we need delivery. Are you able to deliver? So those are the major questions that you all will have to answer in terms of assessing the potential capabilities of the various actors in the political arena.
Realize that the tax cut has really deteriorated our economy within 2 or 3 months of time of the present government coming into power. Have they made any reforms in the same policy that has been taking place, or have they no? So still continuing, and the revenue is still being lost.
Yeah, you see, if you go by international standards, right? Roughly speaking, when you're, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he's the economics expert myself. If you're a middle income country, there is a general rule of the thumb that government income, state income, should be maintained, or at least it should hover around 14 to 16% of GDP, roughly speaking. So what happened with these tax cuts is the levels that we were in, which amounted to 11 or 12, it came down to 9 or 10. So actually the problem is, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, if you just tell me, explain Sri Lanka's economic problem in maybe in a sentence or even half a sentence, we as a country are living beyond our means. Simply put, that's the issue. We are living beyond our means. And that has to be corrected. So correction means macro and micro level adjustments. Adjustments mean there will be externalities, there will be costs, there will be pain. So the rulers should be apportioned the maximum amount of pain, and we should lead from the front, and we should make sacrifices. The gentleman who asked the initial question about how to improve your foreign currency, I just want to add 1 or 2 other issues. We have to have a high ranking in the anti-corruption index. The inflow of FDI, foreign direct investments, will grow if potential investors perceive that there is good governance, that you don't have to go on a whole trail of funding and supporting politicians and officials alike. If the perception is there of some sort of corruption, then you'll have a big problem. That will be a disincentive for FDI to come into Sri Lanka. So we have to have a very high ranking in terms of preventing corruption, and then ease of doing business, creating one-stop shops. Now, I don't mean to go back in time, to my father's time period, nor am I trying to shower praise on him, because I have done an analysis of him and I have seen the pluses and the minuses of his time period. But I still remember, I was a student those days, and one day I had the privilege of just sitting in a side and watching how he conducted his foreign direct investment policy. So every week, the potential government investors are asked to come. So you have the investors and the government officials on two sides, both sides. And do you know what the executive president did? The very first thing, he opened his diary and he gave the potential investor the date for the opening of the factory. No discussion about land, tax benefits, whether the infrastructure was there, whether how the contracts were going to be signed, how much of quota was given. At that time, by the way, the multi-fiber agreement was in place. So you had a quota system, whereas right now we don't have that. That multi-fiber agreement has expired. So the first thing the president did was he gave a date for the opening of the factory. Then what happened? And he said, okay, go ahead. So when you give the date, the officials are obliged to work with the investor to make sure that the opening takes place. So you work in reverse. So that's time targeted implementation of programs. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not saying that the Premadasa policies are appropriate for this day and age, not so. But there are certain things, there are some lessons to be learned in terms of decision making. Why should an investor choose Sri Lanka and not go to Vietnam? So Sri Lanka must be perceived as a better investment destination than Vietnam. You see, investors are not going to come and do us favors. The investors would want the highest rates of return on their investment. So we have to make sure that we create the necessary environment to make sure that when they are pondering about investment destinations, oh, Sri Lanka is the best. That should come into their mind. And to be very honest, I cannot for the life of me think how this government is at least even thinking about attracting these so-called mega investments. Now, I remember a few weeks ago, what was that guy's name? A big investor trying to go into India, but he had obstacles. I forget his name. You all remember his name? Famous guy? Anyway, so if my father was around, he would have sent a Sri Lankan Airlines plane to fetch the investor and bring him here. And famous investor, I forget his name. I'll tell you in a moment. And he would have, given the support to set up his factory. As a country, we interact with several other countries. Why can't we have country-specific industrial zones? Sri Lanka. An industrial zone for Japanese factories. An industrial zone for Indian factories, Chinese factories. Why can't we do that? And so on and so forth. And have particular regimes, legal and otherwise, to encourage them to come, so that they make the choice in favor of Sri Lanka rather than another destination. So I think that's the way to approach that subject. Please. Excuse me, sorry. The company is Tesla, and the investor is Elon Musk. Some of the states were, they were creating a lot of trouble, and they were not allowing him, or at least allocating land.
Dislocation for English, Sri Lanka, because industry mainly depends on the carbon, nanocarbon. So that's for that field.
Yeah. So you see, that's an opportunity, right? So we should grab the opportunity, because there are another 190 odd nation states in the global community doing the same. You think they are watching and waiting? This is a fight. This is a struggle. This is a competition. A competition to gain an advantage as a country. So we should be very surgical, and we should be very strategic in the way we govern the country. And pardon me for saying this, I don't know, when you are governing, my belief is, if you ask a person on the road, what is Sri Lanka's national interest? A, B, C, D, E, he or she should know. The government must pass on the message, communicate to the people, these are our national interests, these are our national strategies, this is what we are doing. Now if you ask about interest, they will say the major motivation for governance is family interest. Whether the next generation are the potential governors of this country, after the sons and daughters, is it the grandchildren? Those are the issues that are being given primacy.
So I am Engineer Chansel. So this organization, known as the Organization of Professional Association, came into being way back in 1970s with the participation of 10 professional associations at that time, mainly to fill the void that was created by the abolition of the Senate at that time. So that was the intention of those 10 professional associations. Now it has grown up to 52 professional associations representing 32 professions. So we are basically the apex professional body in the country, and sometimes there is no such organization in the whole world. And from time to time, on regular basis rather, we have been giving expertise advice to successive governments for formulating their national policies and so on, particularly the national budget, to prepare the national budget, and also for national constitution and things like that. And some governments have accepted those proposals, some not. But my question to you, sir, is what are your plans under a SAB government to get the support of these organizations as professionals? For your national efforts. Thank you very much.
So, as I told you, we are trying to ensure that governance and the government process is a very professional and scientific, fact-based, evidence-based process to the greatest extent possible. I am not going to say that, right from the word go, everything will be perfect. Okay? So that entails, as Honorable Iran would know very well, not merely in the preparation of budgets. You see, in the policy decision-making process, what you are talking about is the aspect of policy inputs, right? So we will of course ensure that in the various subject areas, the various policy experts or groups of experts and individuals are taken, their views are taken into consideration, and they also become part and parcel of the policy decision-making process. So that is not there invariably when you go through the budget rounds. Just as a kind of a standard operating procedure of the government, for namesake, I feel that in recent times, except I do feel that during Honorable Mangala Samarivira's time, he made a determined effort. He was also the finance minister, to very genuinely listen to the various stakeholders in the various processes. So certainly we will consult. We will consult people who can add value. We will consult with people who can contribute. And we will consult with people who will give us out-of-the-box ideas. See, unique situations need unique answers, unique solutions. And we will be a solutions-based government. You see, we will not be, I mean, if you look at the recent history of governmental behavior, it's farcical. It's an insult to the intelligence of the Sri Lankans. It's an insult to the literacy rates. I suppose we have, what, 90, 93, 94 odd percent literacy rates? But with a 94% literacy rate, I mean, some really gulped that Nagaraja thing, that Kalani Nagaraja. What rubbish. So once those mythical stuff are championed, of course it achieved its purpose. What was the purpose? During the 48-hour intervening period when you don't campaign, you fool the people. And I'm sure a large number of votes were accumulated through the Nagaraja policy. But after that, please do this. People in our country think and say, oh, what happened to us? Where is the Nagaraja? Where is the prosperity that this Nagaraja and the new government was supposed to bring about? No, I'm not taking it as a joke, but the main prophecies, the main predictions that you will have a sound economy, you will have prosperity to all because of this Nagaraja, all of a sudden, appearing from the riverbed without creating a flood at all, right? So no, nothing. So it's like boruwa aava, boruwa dakka, boruwa gilla, dunna katire, ethariන් ඉවරයි. Yeah, but still, even if it is a political gimmick, now in most other countries, now we call ourselves country with a 94, 93% literacy rate. So these are the literacy levels. Now there has to be an evaluation. What happened? Where did it go wrong? And then we also have to ask the question, are we going to allow such semantics to take place in the future? So certain Goni Billas will be created, either based on ethnicity, either based on religion or something, or national security. And the warped sense of national security this government has. You see, in this modern day and age, the subject of national security has many facets and many aspects. You have military security, political security. Education is also part of national security. So is health. So is self-sufficiency in food. So are our limited export market destinations. Do you know that most of, I think, either 59 or 60% of our garment exports, they go to US, EU, UK. Look how vulnerable we are. If for some godforsaken reason, some sort of turbulence takes place in those societies, we are finished. So have we as a country penetrated the South American market? Have we penetrated the African market? What are those ambassadors doing there? What are the trade commissioners doing? So, have trust and faith. All these representatives of our motherland abroad, they will be given time-targeted tasks, and their longevity, at least longevity in terms of their employment, will be related to achieving those tasks. You will have that discipline. Watch and see.
Can I'm Dr. Gray. I have a question on anti-corruption. Now, how do you plan to eradicate corruption? And as I see it, it has to start from the top. It has to come from the President, Prime Minister, Cabinet Ministers, and then to the secretaries and downwards. So, do you have a team, or will you be building up a team of men with honesty, integrity, accountability, and trustworthiness, so that they can help and help to govern this country properly?
I hope you don't mind me saying this, men and women, right? So, no, I will have a team of men and women, because as you know very well, we have to encourage women participation. In fact, women participation in our labor force is at a low ebb. I think it's about 34%, and it should be much higher. Anyway, coming back to your question. Okay, my view is you have to create institutions and structures that cannot be interfered upon by politicians and mandate and obligate them to eradicate corruption. This horu allana thing, that's not the job of the politician. We saw how horu allana thing took place. At the end of the day, horu became Hora's best friend, and the horu allana fellows also started committing corruption. So, the politician's job, the legislator's job, the political leader's job is creating an environment where there won't be corruption. Creating institutions which are independent, which cannot be interfered upon, which cannot be politically influenced. So, it has to be an autonomous body, right? So, bringing in good people into government, that's one aspect. Men and women capable, who have the highest interest of the country at heart, and who are willing to sacrifice. No, I'm not saying because he's here. He sacrificed a very cushy life, a very top-notch job at NDB. And he could have gone to the highest echelons in that particular industry if he had stayed there. But he made a decision to come into public service. So bringing in good people, that's one aspect. Making institutions that deal with this corruption issue in terms of finding the robbers, finding the horas, that has to be made autonomous. Autonomous bodies which are legally empowered, where no politician, even if you are the executive president, you make sure that the autonomy and the independence of that body is protected through state legislation, through country legislation. I also think we have to seriously address the issue of campaign finance. When you look at the electoral processes and you look at the financial investments that are needed, at least financial investments is the wrong word, the financial contributions that you need to run a campaign. Humongous amounts. Humongous amounts. You know, I know of people in this contribution sector, roughly speaking, they are twofold. There are some who contribute to campaigns expecting favors. Absolutely no doubt about that. So those are IOUs. I will help you, so you help me back in turn when it comes to various tender processes, etc., etc., etc. So that's one aspect. But do keep in mind, there are other contributors. They only want one thing. You know what they want? They want a level playing field. That's why they contribute to a political party. You establish the level playing field so that on any given sector or topic, a multiplicity of business institutions can compete, and may the best company or best person or individual win. So they want a system where there is no political interference in the system of deciding on the grant of contracts, the grant of businesses, and so on and so forth. So those are the two types of contributors that I have identified in whatever experience that we have had in the political arena, in what we have learned, we have studied. So we have to have major reforms in our campaign finance laws. In the US, you have, for example, limitations to a contribution that an individual can make. Fundraising events, there are certain caps whereby, you have those dinner events whereby the ticket may cost, I don't know, roughly $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, and you raise monies through those events. So there's a cap on how much a ticket cost can be. So these are just basic stuff that I'm telling you. So overall, you have to have a very clear-cut look at campaign finance, strengthen the institutions that drive anti-corruption, make it autonomous, make it legally independent, make sure that they are not subjected to political interference, and also, as you said, try and encourage the cream of society to come into governance, which is not an easy thing. Let alone coming into governance in Sri Lanka now, the cream of society is thinking of alternative destinations to live their lives, right? So first and foremost, we have to retain them in our country, stop the brain drain, stop the, I'd like to use a new word, the brain exodus. There's an exodus taking place. So you go to the Masai Mara and you see the various crossings of the antelopes and the I forget those what they're called. They go at fast pace. I'm not trying to equate the intelligence of our country to that, but they have lost expectations, and there's a huge exodus taking place. And countries such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they are headhunting our talent. They are giving our people with skills, they are giving people who are equipped with talent, highly educated, such as software engineers, even nurses, doctors. They are giving them excellent packages. So they are, trying to encourage them to come to their own country. So that has to be stopped. The brain drain. So all in all, you can be rest assured that we as a government, we will ensure that corruption will be eradicated, if not minimized. I can't lie to you to, just come and come and say, oh, it will be eradicated from day one. I'm not going to lie to you about that. There'll be some time lag that may take place, but we will ensure that we will have good governance, and we will be one of the highest ranking countries in the anti-corruption indices worldwide. But we will not have politicians being given the task of deciding who the person who commits corruption and not, because then you're paving the way for political deals. If, say, for example, say someone like Honorable Iran Vikramatne, so there is a great demand for him to come to talk shows, especially that deals with issues such as domestic economic affairs and foreign policy and many other areas. So people are familiar with him. There's name recognition, there's facial recognition. For a new entrant into the political sphere, someone who has not mingled with the people, it will be a challenging task. I mean, it's very difficult for me to give you numbers in terms of quantification. If you work with the people throughout a particular period and gain name recognition, maybe you have to spend less in a campaign. But if you are a new entrant and you have to start anew, nobody knows who you are, yeah, certainly that person will have to raise substantial funds.
not unfair for him to make that money during the time he
So,
personally, I think it's not unfair because we can't, person coming to serve us, we can't let him go be down on the deal.
that is why I say there needs to be campaign finance reform. Now, in the US, you have a situation where the taxpayer funds campaigns, right? So, your resources will be used for political campaigns if we are looking at the US model. That is also one aspect. So, but I don't think Sri Lanka has, when we have lived beyond our means, I don't think we have any surplus funds to be spent on campaigns. No, but what you say is an issue that needs to be addressed, that needs to be talked about. I mean, the fact that you mentioned, one might also ask, why spend 200 million in a campaign? Because, the law of opportunity cost means you can put it into a financial institution and reap some sort of an interest income, right? So there you can look at you call it avastita pirive or opportunity cost. So these are major issues that we all have to talk about, that we all have to address. But I can tell you, major campaigns, right? I'm not going to beat about the bush, right? Let's say there's a presidential election tomorrow or day after, or within the next few months. You need to have at least, I believe, at least 7-8 billion rupees, roughly speaking. However much you may be having a high name recognition, because even though you have the name recognition, you have to kind of compete with your political opponents in terms of airtime, in terms of visibility, in terms of traction. So, no, this is a very, very important neglected topic which we need to talk about. But there are schemes to make sure that politicians remain honest, and dishonesty will result in incalculable damage for that particular politician, e.g. Singapore. But here again, you can't talk of those various schemes that they have devised because of the scarce funding that we have as a country. So right now, I think the major issue we have at our doorstep is the economic issue. So we have to somehow or other make sure that our economic fundamentals are sound. That's what's important. Get our economic fundamentals sorted, and also delve into the issues that you just brought up, because these are major issues. And major issues that also acts as a hindrance to economic growth. Because when you have corruption, people won't come and invest. You won't have FDI. You will have FDI going into other countries. And the country will, suffer losses, and the people will suffer losses. So what the point that you brought up is very significant. It's an important point, and it's a point that should be addressed. But right now, I must be very honest, first thing comes first. We have to fix the country, fix the economy. Because to use a phrase in American political terms, voodoo economics of the present administration has led this country to a perilous state. You've heard of the word voodoo economics? That's a word, a phrase that then Republican presidential candidate George Bush, during the primaries in the 1970s, used to criticize Reaganomics. You know that Ronald Reagan had George Bush as his deputy. He was the vice president, correct? So he became the vice president, all right, but before that, George Bush also competed with Ronald Reagan for the candidacy, right? So how George Bush described, George Bush Senior, by the way, not the son, Senior. George Bush Senior described Ronald Reagan's economic policies as voodoo economics. So we have similar voodoo economics. In a way it's true, no, because the first option in terms of preventing COVID was throwing pots into the river and also having that so-called local syrup with indigenous medicine, the pannier. Whereas if we had had the brains to order the vaccines beforehand, I'm sure the number of deaths could have been minimized. And I don't think that the numbers that they are talking about, there are, I believe, even though I don't have any evidence to prove, I don't think that they are authentic numbers.
So thank you very much, Honorable Sajith Premadasa, Leader of the Opposition, for being with us this evening over 2.5 hours, although we didn't plan to have it for that long. And also I must take this opportunity to thank Honorable Eran Wickramaratne for gracing this occasion and being able to come and spend some time with us. We have prepared a very small token of appreciation to be given to Honorable Sajith Premadasa. We'll do that and then maybe followed by a formal vote of thanks by the General Secretary, Engineer Upali Jayawardena.
Honorable Sajith Premadasa, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Eran Wickramaratne, Member of the Parliament, the President Mr. Dulite Perra and the members of the head table, dear past President, ladies and gentlemen. It is great pleasure me to stand before you to propose the vote of thanks at this great important event. OPA is the apex body of professional associations which deliberate important national issues. First of all, I must thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and sharing your views with the members of the OPA in spite of your busy schedule. Sir, I thank you for your valuable thoughts and comments shared with members in this great organization. Honorable Eran Wickramaratne, I wish to thank you for your participation and sharing of your views on the account of situation of this country. I thank President Dulite Perra. He initiated this program after 2-3 years time. Actually, this was initiated by our past presidents 2-3 years back. So that I thank Mr. Dulite Perra and our past presidents, those who are participated and given us the valuable advices. I wish to thank all the members of the General Forum and Executive Council as well as the members of the OPA for their participation in this event. Also, I thank those who participated in this event by online. Last but not least, I wish to thank the General Center Director and the staff of OPA who provided the logistics assistance. Thank you very much.
Here.